Computer systems that can autonomously work on menial tasks have been the promise of technologists and science fiction authors for decades. While we've dabbled with the likes of robotic process automation and machine learning in the past, the arrival of advanced AI software has put these lofty ambitions back on the table. According to AI developers, new systems known as AI agents will free up workers as never before, with the ability to autonomously complete tasks based on pre-approved instructions and by contextually processing new data. What does all this mean for business, and how far can AI agents really go? You're listening to the IT Pro podcast. Hi, I'm Rory Bathgate. Jane can't be with us today, but I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Paul O'Sullivan, UKI CTO at Salesforce, to discuss the potential of AI agents. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you for having me.
So, to start with, Paul, for those who don't know, what is an AI agent?
Great question. An AI agent is effectively the ability for agents to now take action. So obviously we've had an enormous amount of excitement in the field when we look at the advancements in AI, moving from predictive AI to obviously most recently generative AI. But even generative AI, there's been a lack of value realization for customers, for businesses, for consumers. And what do I mean by that? Well, we think about foundational models. They're fantastic. It was a huge breakthrough because it was able to predict kind of the next word in a sentence or a string, and therefore now be able to kind of craft language appropriately and interact with language, so understand it. But when we think about the future and agents, and we think about agentic AI has far broader ability now. So we're using AI to not just generate text, but actually to reason on what the human is trying to achieve and actually try and understand from that reasoning capability the actions that need to be executed, and then fulfilling that promise by actually allowing the agent to take the action. So it's an incredible breakthrough. At Salesforce, we obviously launched Agentforce back in October last year, one of the very first to be able to bring agents to customers. And it's really exciting when I think about some of the practical use cases now, how agents can not just transform businesses and enterprises, but how they can actually just supercharge people using AI technology in everyday life. So really excited, but in its basic format, agents are the ability now with agentic AI to not just produce words and text or images, but actually to be able to fulfill actions and reason on those actions for people. So an extension of probably our digital workforce of the future.
So it's really putting AI in the driving seat rather than keeping it as a tool alongside workers.
Absolutely. So, if we think about some of the breakthroughs we've had, and like, let's just look at the broader technology for a minute. ChatGPT back in November 22 really got everybody excited. The fastest adopted technology in our lifetime, with over 100 million users within 2 months. But again, that excitement has kind of fizzled out a little bit because of the value. Now, obviously, as we see what's happening in the field and the progression that's being made, the ability to kind of just reason, to understand, and then to fulfill those actions is quite incredible. And it's not just, if we think about kind of the co-pilot era, co-pilots were great. They were an assistant that sat alongside us, that kind of enhanced our knowledge and understanding of a topic or what we were trying to achieve, but again, limited in its capacity because it couldn't actually do anything with that data or that information. That was still down to the human. But now with humans and agents working side by side, I can collaborate with an agent in Slack. We could be in a channel together talking about a particular topic or what we need to do. And the agent can go and fulfill those tasks for me. They can update the record in the CRM, or they can go and build a campaign for me, or do a kind of a customer segmentation. So very useful because they're now an extension of my ability and actually frees up a lot of my time to focus on some of those real, not just the high value tasks, but to be really creative and think about kind of, how could I go and engage with a customer slightly differently, or how could I do something differently? So it's hugely, it's not going to just drive an immense amount of productivity. It's going to really augment the world that we live in.
So to compare this with traditional automation for a second, because there will be some listeners who will think, well, I had maybe RPA back in the day, kind of step-based automation for say scheduling emails or something like that. To compare that with AI agents, is it the case that one of the main differentiators here is context, that an AI agent can reason through steps with changing contexts, and can be sort of set up and set off to go and complete tasks autonomously without needing to be manually adjusted if, say, the conditions change?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I talk to a lot of customers who say, we've invested a lot of money in kind of our RPA capability. And what's going to be really interesting is the fact that we can now have agents that can execute some of those RPA kind of tasks and workflows. But it kind of, for me, it goes one step even further than that. Because if you think about RPA capability, very similar to kind of traditional chatbots, everything had to be systematically programmed. There was a logical kind of approach and workflow and set of steps that needed to be executed in a particular order to allow it to be successful in completing that task. If we now think about kind of the RPA capability supercharged with agentic AI, the opportunity is incredible, because you may well have, 10 steps to, an RPA process or a workflow. But imagine having agentic AI capability that can sit on top of that can start to kind of use its reasoning capability to evolve the business process and to optimize and drive efficiency. So those 10 steps that you traditionally would execute using an RPA tool, by applying agentic AI, 10 steps could become 9. And then if it still gets to the same outcome, there is no reason why the reasoning capability can't kind of try and execute the same output and the same goal with 8 steps, and then with 7, and then with 6, until you get to an optimized kind of business process. Because lots of customers have developed business processes over, decades that served a purpose at a time in which it needed it. But we see now businesses evolving, and consumer demand and customer demand is changing rapidly. So we need to be able to kind of unlock new levels of growth for customers using incredible technology. And this is where, when we think about RPA capability and agentic AI with agents, it just unleashes a completely new world. Now, customers have also said to me, Rory, as well, they've said to me, but hang on a minute, I've just spent millions of pounds in building out kind of my RPA processes and driving a lot of automation across my enterprise. You don't necessarily have to waste that or throw it away. We can have agents that can now can trigger those processes. And actually that can get you to greater value quicker for an enterprise when you bring, some of that technology together. That said, agents will over time, as I described kind of in the process optimization kind of piece, will over time kind of, I would say, would leapfrog traditional API and offer something that's completely new for businesses to kind of execute. But I still think there's a place for RPA today in some kind of opportunity for customers.
So at this point, it might be useful to discuss some of the main use cases for AI agents right now. I know that at first there was quite a lot of talk around their use in knowledge work, but equally now there's a lot of talk around their use for programming and other complex tasks. So what are some of the main use cases that you see for AI agents right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the possibilities are endless, but what are we seeing now? So very early on, we saw a lot of focus in the customer service domain. How can we optimize customer service? How can we augment some employees in that customer service world? But actually, our customers are getting really creative now. If I take Heathrow Airport, they use Agentforce to bring together kind of lots of real-time data from Heathrow's knowledge base, beacons, and flight information to respond to kind of thousands of traveler kind of questions instantly and simultaneously. And actually, what's really interesting for Heathrow, and this is a combination of different technologies playing its part, 40% of travellers who go through Heathrow don't speak English as their first language. So Agentforce is using voice and text translation capabilities to provide real-time language support, breaking down the barriers and ensuring all passengers feel informed and at ease. So if you think about that from an experience perspective, I'm going through the airport, I'm trying to find kind of what my gate information is, where my baggage is, and I'm also kind of worried that I need to go grab some lunch before I jump on the plane or something like that. But now, rather than kind of trailing through lots of FAQs, by aggregating that data and using an agent to surface that up and allowing customers to put a question or a kind of an intent through to an agent, you can get direct responses to your question and what you need. And what is incredible with Heathrow is they've actually now seen, because of the reasoning engine and using reinforcement learning techniques, and the more you use it, the smarter it gets, we're able to achieve a 95% accuracy rate with Agentforce, which is remarkable. But, another customer example is somebody like Capita. Capita have started to use Agentforce to screen CVs in the recruitment process, which again, if you think about, they are a huge volume business with 43,000 colleagues simultaneously serving 35 million end users daily. That's a lot of work that needs to be done. And it's a great opportunity for, agentic AI and agents to start kind of screening CVs, looking for patterns, understanding candidate profiles, and bringing and looking at the skills that individuals will bring so that they can actually quickly deploy them into the field and put people to work, which is a great use case. And there's tons more when we think about proactive fraud detection in financial services, for an example. How can you alert people and identify things like we've done previously with kind of pattern matching with predictive AI, but now actually to be able to summarize where we think the fraud might take place with generative and then agentic AI and proactiveness is going to be really important for businesses moving forward as well. So there's lots of huge use cases. And I think every day I'm seeing more and more from customers and, colleagues within Salesforce as well.
You've named a number of different use cases there. Is there anything that at present AI agents maybe can't yet do? Or is there a specific task that you think there's a conversation around, will they ever be able to fully do this task?
I think it's an interesting question, because I think we are at Salesforce, we're looking at kind of what we call the multiple waves of AI. So obviously wave one was predictive AI, which we've all had for a very long time. Wave two was the generative wave. And now we're in wave three, which is the autonomous and kind of agentic AI wave. We predict that wave four is probably the robotic wave, where you have a combination of robotic technologies and artificial intelligence. Now, I think that is another leap forward and another kind of chasm that we'll kind of take on together. But what's really interesting, I think, to answer your question is, are there things that aren't possible yet? I think where we still need kind of a human connection or kind of a mechanical kind of execution of an activity, I think those things are still being worked through. I think we still see a huge breakthroughs in robotics and intelligence in that space, but we're not quite there yet. So I think those would be some of the things that are still to be explored. I mean, we're constantly evolving and we're moving at a pace of change that I've never seen before in my career. And I do wonder if this is the slowest we will ever move because of how everything is evolving at such a pace. But it's I haven't necessarily come across anything yet that is not feasible or possible with the technology that we see. We are, for an example, some of my team, I've got an incredible bunch of creative engineers And we are very kind of empowered and driven to use AI technology in conjunction with what we do. One of my engineers has actually built an avatar of me in a virtual world that is backed up by Salesforce's Agent Force, fully trained on all of our kind of Agent Force material, so that you can ask it a question, you can query technical things, you can ask kind of how does the trust layer really work, you can dive into complex technical understanding. You can actually, even if we fed it the future roadmap, you could probably ask it questions about our future roadmap as well. But again, this is where I think the whole user experience is going to evolve around AI and agentic AI, and this is where we see Slack comes into play really well, because if we think about a workforce communicating and interacting with each other in Slack, if we will deploy agents into Slack, and we have them already here at Salesforce, that can augment and support and fulfill tasks for people. I've also been doing a lot of research because, long time ago, used to be an engineer, have lots of friends that are still hands on keyboard. And I've been doing lots of research around kind of what Gartner's been saying. Gartner has been saying that generative AI, one of the biggest software engineers are one of the biggest that will benefit from generative AI. To your point, Rory, around kind of writing code, and we're seeing what kind of Anthropics are doing with the ability to, with Claude to write code. It's fascinating, but we've been looking at agents that could mimic Scrum Masters, for an example, because Scrum Masters are, their role is to support engineers, allowing them to focus on building the solutions or building the products. So how could a Scrum Master or an agent equivalent Scrum Master help with things like daily stand-ups, updating tickets on a board, sprint planning, all of your ceremonies? And what's really interesting is not just the fact that you could build your digital Scrum Master agent, but you've then got an infinite scalability and a Scrum Master that works 24/7. But what you've also got is you've got a very consistent Scrum Master that has learned a methodology and will execute that methodology by the book. Now, I spoke to my brother-in-law. He's, still a hands-on keyboard engineer, and we were having this conversation on would it be a good thing or a bad thing, and would the engineering community kind of embrace a digital Scrum Master? And after much debate and thought, the answer was yes, because actually there are some great Scrum Masters out there, and then there are some that are not necessarily great. But you'd still probably need a kind of a human Scrum Master that sits above kind of multiple digital agent Scrum Masters that could do the orchestration. But you could start getting these agent Scrum Masters to go and do all of the reporting, understand your burn down, your velocity, your throughput. So there's huge opportunity, I think, for all of us to be really creative in our thinking and going, what could be the next agent that could revolutionize our day-to-day activities?
You've raised an interesting point there around where an agent fits into a hierarchy when you have human workers and you have agents working alongside one another. A traditional chatbot, if you like, would follow a workflow that has it answer maybe low-level questions and then eventually hand a user over to a human worker if the user's problem isn't solved in, say, a set amount of time. Do agents raise the bar for how complex a problem they can solve before they hand over to a human worker? Or do they circumvent the need to hand over to a human worker entirely?
Great question, Rory. I think when we all looked a couple of years back at chatbots and digital channels of engagement with customers to facilitate queries, it was all about deflection. Everybody wanted to deflect from the contact center because our human workers were tremendously overwhelmed. I think our customers, and what I'm seeing now from our customers, is this presents the opportunity not to deflect, but to drive resolution. And I think I'm seeing lots of customers now try and set the goals of first time resolution with agents on digital channels. And that digital channel might be, web, voice, even, WhatsApp as a channel of engagement. Because I think there is a realization that agents can, as the maturity of the agent progresses, if you think about in the Salesforce platform, how we've built Agentforce is fundamentally around three kind of core components. One is the topic. Now, the topic is about the job to be done. This may be, go and provide information to a customer about shipping information. It might be topics like change of booking, or the reservation that I've made at a restaurant where I want to kind of update my party size and increase from 4 people to 6 people. Now, if you define your topics and you build your topics out over a period of time, you're effectively giving your agents more jobs to be done. And again, this can all be done with natural language. So we're removing complexities of having to write code. The second component is about what we call the instructions. So when you define the topics, you then need to set the instructions. And these instructions talk about things like that they act as the guardrails. For an example, don't necessarily talk about a competitor, or always check and verify somebody's email address, or ask them to authenticate themselves. So again, the instructions act as guardrails and kind of keep that safety net and trust established. And then the third component is for Agentforce is effectively the actions. So what is the action that you need to fulfill as part of that job to be done? Now, those actions could be, a prompt. So it could be a well-structured prompt to go and use, RAG techniques, retrieval augmentation grounding, to take data objects out of different data sources to enrich the response back to the customer. Or again, go and fetch information within multiple systems. Doesn't necessarily have to be the CRM, because we can retrieve information from all of the middle and back office systems as well. But the first could be a prompt with RAG techniques. The second kind of action could be, an Apex class. So execute a piece of code. It could be an API call off to another system. It could be update a record. It could be anything like that. And then the third component is obviously flow, which is our workflow management capability, where effectively you could trigger a flow that could have multiple steps in the process. But again, the agent can do that on your behalf. So for an example, you may have a customer coming in with a customer inquiry. They might want to update a booking. You can then obviously go and update all of the necessary systems through that executed flow. And some of those systems might sit downstream from kind of the Salesforce platform. So as the maturity of the agents grow, well, to come back to your kind of original question, what we will see is a slowdown in the handoff to humans, because we will be able to drive more resolution across a wider set of topics for our customers in time, which is really, really fascinating. Because if you can imagine the pressure that you can take off of these contact centers, it will be huge. In fact, a great example is a customer of ours, OpenTable. So OpenTable, every time you kind of now do a reservation or you have a change to the reservation for booking a restaurant, 73% of changes to reservations are now handled with Agentforce, which is incredible, because actually you've allowed the workforce to not feel the pressure of all of the different changes that you need to handle and the different systems that you update, because you've been able to orchestrate that across one deeply unified platform using Agentforce. So it is quite remarkable. I think all customers will be on a journey though, because I think you're still going to have agents initially in their very kind of initial use cases. They won't have access to all of the different actions or jobs to be done and topics. So over a period of time, customers will be able to look at their consumer behaviors, what their customers need, and then they'll be able to evolve their topics and actions over a period of time to just drive more resolution as opposed to deflection. So it's really interesting, but I think businesses need to start building out their roadmaps, not just their use cases. They need a catalog of use cases, but then they need to prioritize based on their business needs and to start building out a roadmap for agents across their organization.
As part of the roadmap that you've mentioned for implementing agents, when it comes to implementing agents alongside your workforce and getting your workforce used to using AI agents, what are some of the key skills that workers need to use agents effectively? And how can you go about giving them these skills?
Skills is a crucial thing that all businesses need to look at. Not just businesses. I would also encourage, our education system to think about, the skills of the future. And if I think about what we have invested in from a UKI perspective across Salesforce with our AI center, it's a commitment we made. We opened our AI center back in June last year with a focus and a purpose around helping bring together kind of our customers, industry experts, and different businesses to look at how do we close the digital skills gap? How do we drive empowerment of AI across workforces, etc.? Now, if I think about the skills required, there is a need for data literacy and an understanding of kind of how you will manage your data in a compliant way, not just a compliant way, but understand what data that you need to put into the AI, what data you shouldn't put into the AI, and again, the safety and guardrails associated with that. So data is an absolute crucial skill to understand for the future. I think prompt engineering and the ability to shape and define prompts in a descriptive way that gets you to the output you're looking for quicker is equally crucial. I talk to lots of customers, and whenever we kind of do a session, we talk about how many times does it take you to kind of put your prompt in before you get the response. And there is typically kind of a 4 or 5 kind of iteration before you get what you're looking for back from the foundational model or the LLM. But you can't do that across an enterprise, because if you release AI technology or generative AI technology across 10,000 people in your workforce, and it takes them on average 4 times or 4 attempts to get to the output, that's not cost effective for your business. So I think the skills to be able to shape prompts, build prompts, and then actually deploy prompts across your enterprise in templates will be absolutely crucial. I think we're going to see kind of a need for more security skills in the future, understanding the threats associated with, not just AI, but people external to your organization using AI for phishing attacks and other different things. So I think those are kind of some of the key skills that you probably need to be thinking about within your organization if you're not already. Clearly, there is a need for data scientists. However, what I would say is, we've taken very much an approach at Salesforce around, leveraging our low code and pro code capability. So we're trying to remove the complexity of needing data scientists, because there isn't enough. Let's be honest about it. There isn't enough in the field. So can we still use and apply AI techniques and AI solutions without needing kind of lots of training models and creating bespoke kind of foundational models? Also, the other thing about this is some of these models are going to be commodities in the future. We're going to see price points are going to drop. Therefore, you need to be flexible and you need the ability to swap in and out and use what's relevant for your business, which again is a primary focus for us at Salesforce, that level of openness and flexibility in our architecture to allow customers to do that and be adaptable over time. But I think really for me, core skills, data, security, prompt building, I think also just some foundational engineering practices around kind of API integration, because there's a lot of ability now to bring different systems and different technologies together to craft something that is differentiated value for a business, as opposed to, I have to build my own model. The reality of your own model is, in lots of cases, it doesn't make sense, because there is a model out there that's probably more efficient and more accurate that can get you to the outcome. And you need to just understand, how can I leverage that for my business needs? The other point I would raise is a clear focus on sustainability. These models are energy hungry. So we've got to be really careful here on the balances and trade-offs. As we all have over the multiple decades of building, IT systems, there's always a trade-off in every design we put forward, pros and cons. So again, I think the same thing applies when we think about the AI technology that's out there. We're going to need all of those skills, but then we're going to have to work in an ecosystem that allows us the flexibility, the openness, the creativity, and the ability to bring data from multiple different sources and connect it all together. So there is lots to consider. And one of the things I talk to customers about is connecting your data strategy with your AI strategy and then underpinning that with future skills. Because I think we've all got data strategies, but the new world of AI demands us to link the two together, I think.
So Mark Benioff, CEO at Salesforce, has suggested that today's leaders will be the last to have all human workforces, driven by the kind of advancements that we've been talking about throughout the episode. How close do you think we are to this reality, and what do you see on the horizon for AI agents?
I think we're very close. I'm seeing it in particular customers already. I think it's a matter of time, and I think every enterprise is going to have an agent working in their enterprise within the next 12 to 18 months. If they don't, there is a huge risk to their business, because the productivity gains, the efficiencies are huge, and you can't overlook that. So I think it's now. I think it's happening today already. I think it's tremendously exciting. I work every day with agents. I have agents deployed within Salesforce that support me in everything me and my team do. So it's happening, and I look at some of our customer success stories. I think the customers that are exploring this now with a level of curiosity around their wider business and how they operate are the customers that are going to win in the future. There are some that are still debating. There are some that are really far ahead and are actively deploying. I think we're on a huge transformation journey, and I think it cannot be ignored. I think if it's ignored at this point, I think there's a real threat to enterprises that may not exist in 5-10 years. So my recommendation is, if you haven't yet explored agentic AI, heard about it or learnt about it, be curious, go and ask the questions, because if you don't, I think we're going to get left behind. But it is happening now, Rory. It's great to see. So it's super exciting.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. But Paul, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rory.
As always, you can find links to all of the topics we've spoken about today in the show notes, and even more on our website at itpro.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, as well as subscribe to our daily newsletter. Don't forget to subscribe to the IT Pro podcast wherever you find podcasts. And if you're enjoying the show, let us know by leaving a rating or review. We'll be back next week with more from the world of IT, but until then, goodbye.